It's time to get the story behind the story. Interviews with newsmakers, news breakers, and Vermonters making a difference. WCAX presents 802 News with Mark Johnson. Here's Mark.
Bill Stenger's fall from grace could hardly be more dramatic. In 2011, the Vermont Chamber of Commerce named him its Citizen of the Year as he traveled the globe raising hundreds of millions of dollars for a series of projects to revitalize the economically depressed Northeast Kingdom. Today, the one-time king of the kingdom is a convicted felon who served time in connection with the biggest fraud in state history. That fraud included his business partner, Ariel Quiros, a Miami businessman, siphoning off $50 million of the more than $400 million Stenger led the effort to raise from foreign investors who hoped to gain permanent residency in the United States. While Stenger was never accused of stealing money and claims he didn't know Quiros was until federal authorities stepped in, he failed so many in so many ways. He didn't ask enough questions when he suspected something was wrong, and whether intentionally or unintentionally, whether by design or neglect or, as he claims, by naivety, he and others put the future and the money of investors at risk. Whether all 800-plus who trusted him are made whole remains to be seen. Vermont taxpayers will also have to pony up $16 million as part of the scandal. Some of the projects were completed, and Stenger has helped find a company to take over part of the building intended for ANC Bio. But there's an empty lot in downtown Newport locals call the Hole that serves as a reminder of the failed dreams and promises Stenger played the key role in promoting. In this edition of 802 News, Stenger talks about how he missed the red flags, the mistakes he made, and what he's doing now to restore his reputation and finish the job he set out to do. Let's start with you got out of prison last year in March.
March 22nd.
You're not a young man, you're in your 70s. Tell me about that experience being in jail.
Well, I showed up on June 6th, 9 months earlier than March 22nd. And my wife and I got in the car 7 o'clock in the morning to drive down to Devens, Massachusetts, which is located in Ayer, Massachusetts. And obviously, a lot of things go through your mind as you're driving south with your spouse, who you've been married to for 51 years. And you say to yourself, how the hell can this be happening? And we talked about a lot of things on the way down, but my timetable for that day was that I was to report about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So we got to the facility, walked in with Mary Jane to the lobby of the prison and announced who I was, as I was instructed to, because that's what's known as self-reporting. The officer took my license, identified me. He said, you can say your goodbyes now. And that's obviously when it really hit me that I was going to turn around and give my wife a hug, and she was going to walk out the door and get in the car and drive home. And I was going to be brought into the prison and processed as someone reporting for duty. Went into the prison, they fingerprinted you, mugshotted you, did a physical exam, checked your medical records because it was in the middle of COVID. And fortunately, I had all my COVID shots and all the things that go with that, and was sort of in a situation where I could immediately go to the camp, which was adjacent to the prison. The prison that I checked into has about 1,100 prisoners, and it's a combination of a hospital and specialized medium security prison. And then about a mile from there, there's a camp that looks like a dormitory. No fences, no walls, no bars. Pretty big recreation space around it. And that is where about 60 fellas lived and were detained. So after about 2 hours of processing in the main prison, I was picked up by a driver from the camp and brought up to the camp and assigned a bunk. And immediately, probably 15 or 20 guys who were in the camp as residents, prisoners, they all came up to me and introduced themselves and actually dropped off a gift, some food, a candy bar, some soap. Because you go there, you don't have anything. No toothbrush, no hair comb, nothing. But I guess the protocol is that when a new prisoner arrives, that there's a certain group of people that'll offer some things to help you get through until you can order some supplies from the commissary. So by 4 o'clock, I checked in at 1, and by 4 o'clock, I'm processed and in the camp facility, and had a bunk, and somebody delivered some bed linens that you make your bed. You start to look around and figure out where are you and who are these people that are literally feet away from you. I entered the prison with the idea that I was going to do everything that I possibly could to be constructive and contributory and cooperative. You've obviously heard the term a model prisoner, and I went in there with the idea that Bill Stenger was going to be a model prisoner and take every opportunity I could to influence how long I would be there. My sentence was 18 months, but you automatically get, when you self-surrender, you automatically get a 15% reduction. So I knew that when I got there that I was at the most probably looking at 15 months of time. And I very soon after getting there learned that there were programs and courses and things you could do on a day-to-day basis and a week-to-week basis that would further reduce the time that you would be there. So I was lucky in a way that the day after I got there, they had an orientation for about a half dozen incoming prisoners. And that allowed me to access courses and things that were about to start. There were a couple of fellows who had been there a month and a half with no orientation. And I just happened to be lucky that I had an orientation the day after I got there and learned about a half dozen different courses that I could enroll in that would, when completed, would further reduce the time that you were going to be there. And I was vigilant about those courses, and I signed up for every course that was available to anybody for anything, because it would help me build credits for earlier release. And that's what I did. Now, every resident of the camp has a job. And 3 or 4 days after I got there, the gentleman who is responsible administratively for the camp came to me and asked me if I wanted to be an administrative orderly in the warden's office in the main prison. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? What do I do? What does the job entail? And what it wound up was that I would walk down to the main prison, which was about 3/4 of a mile away. Check in about 7:30, get all the offices neat and clean and orderly, and spend probably 3 hours doing that each morning. And then I would go back to the camp from probably 10 until 2 or 1:30, and then I would go back down to the main prison and repeat that morning protocol. And then by 4 o'clock, I was back up. By 3:30, I was back up at the camp, and dinner was served at 4. That was the daily routine, and the courses that I would take were usually between 10:30, 11, and 2, or they might be in the evening.
Courses on what?
Courses on some courses were religious based. Some courses were getting members of the community together to talk about their history and their lives and why they were there and how could we help one another cope with and improve our lives there. There were courses on U.S. history, on international relations, things you would enjoy going to. There was a 12-week course on the Civil War, which was incredibly fascinating. A variety of different things. I had the opportunity to meet people that I never, ever would have met before. People whose upbringings were incredibly challenging and tragic. A lot of young fellas there. I think half of the fellas there were 60 of us. Half were probably under 30. Most of them were there because of drug-related offenses, mostly trafficking. A lot of those young guys didn't even know who their fathers were. Came from very difficult homes, no home. And, I never interacted with that community, that type of community in my life. But I became friends with a lot of these young guys because I kind of represented to them this older white guy that would speak to them every day, would greet them every day, that would interact with them, treat them with respect, something that they weren't really used to from a 70-year-old white guy.
You the oldest guy there?
When I left, I was the oldest guy. And I also befriended some fellas who had been in prison for 25 years. And they were in the camp because they were on the last year of their term in prison. And the protocol was that the closer you got to getting out, the more freedom you got to prepare to get into the public. And I befriended a couple of these fellas who reached out to me, probably more than I did them, but I was very willing and happy to embrace them because they would ask me lots of questions about what should they do, what can they do to prepare themselves for the fact that they haven't been in society for 25 years other than their family and friends coming to visit them. And that you could see in their day-to-day approach that they were living a life of a prisoner and were ill-prepared to leave the door. And how do they cope with living and earning a living and coping with the fact they're going from a totally controlled environment to one where they have to adjust to a remarkably different set of circumstances. And I showed them how to put resumes together, and we did some mock interviews of job recruiting and, what do you do when you go to an interview? How does it work? What should you be thinking about? How do you prepare? And you could see in their eyes that they were eager to learn, but they were scared about becoming free.
Were you scared being there?
No, never once. Every person who was at the facility that I lived in was a nonviolent person. I never felt threatened. I never was in any way worried. I didn't start out that way. The first few days or week that I was there, I was, like I was a guy looking in the headlights and wondering, am I going to be surprised by something? And I never was. Because everyone who's at that camp knows that if you do anything that's out of bounds, you're going into the inside, which is a whole different world. I mean, it couldn't be more different.
You were lucky to have been put there, but let's go back to, the plea agreement that you signed would have called for a sentence of up to 5 years. That's what the prosecutors were looking for. You got only 18 months. Then you get out in 9 months. Prosecution not happy about that. I know a number of Vermonters who wonder whether or not you paid the price. Do you feel as though you paid the price for what you did?
In a lot of ways, I've paid the price. The whole idea of the fact that the U.S. attorney expressed contempt for the fact that I was released earlier than he would have liked has an interesting backstory to it. When I checked into the facility and I learned about all the programs that they made available to inmates, I was eager to participate in those things because I wanted to get home to my wife and to my family, and for obvious reasons. And I had accumulated enough time through these programs and something called the CARES Act, where if you're over a certain age, nonviolent offender, maybe have some health issues, which at 75, I've got, my share of health issues. I had a protocol, which every prisoner has, to apply for home detention. That doesn't mean you're free. It just means you serve your sentence or the remaining portion of your sentence at home, literally in the confines of your house. You can go to a doctor's appointment or you can go to a legal appointment, but you don't have freedom.
Do you get a bracelet?
Yes. Yeah, you have a bracelet and you're home. I applied for release. The administration at the prison authorized my release because of what I had done while I was there, the job that I had done, the courses I had taken, my conduct while there. Was I a model prisoner? I was. And they reward people who perform well at work, do course administration that they recommend, never give them a problem. And you're allowed, because you've built up that, I guess you'd call it track record, you're allowed to apply for early release. And I applied, and I was notified that they were processing my papers for release in December. of that year. And
22.
yeah, and that would have been about a 6-month period of time there. 2 days before that date, I was notified by my support administrator that for some reason my release was denied. And I asked, I said, well, why? What's the reason? The administration here has authorized my release to home confinement. Not my release to the public, my release to home confinement. And they said, well, all it says here is that you're considered a risk to public safety, which is a code word there for somebody at the U.S. Attorney's Office was given the opportunity to veto your release. And that's what happened. I had the right to appeal that decision, and I did. And the basis of my appeal was, why do you offer prisoners who are coming in the opportunity to improve their release protocol by doing the following things? And then you allow someone else hundreds of miles away with no knowledge of your conduct to arbitrarily veto your release. Weeks went by while my appeal was being reviewed. And interestingly enough, and I have the document with me actually, a memo was written from Washington totally changing the policy nationally, disallowing attorneys from afar to veto release protocol that someone has earned with the approval and the support of the Bureau of Prisons. So I think something positive came from it for others who were in the same situation, who work hard at doing the right things, being good prisoners, contributing to the community there, and earning further release opportunity. So on March, I think it was about March 10th or 12th, I was notified of this policy change, and I was given a date of March 22nd as my release. And a gentleman that was just across the hall from me was getting out March 21st for the same reason. This policy change rendered him ready for release.
I understand when you say that this would have also included home confinement, but I mean, let's also be real here. I mean, being at home is a lot different than being in jail. I mean, as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking to myself, you know, you were so fortunate to get out in 9 months, and it sounds as though you really thought it should have even been less. And, you know, we'll talk about the severity or what you view as the severity here of what happened, but I mean, wow. 9 months, 6 months? I mean, that sounds it almost sounds a little greedy on your part.
I can understand why you would say that. If you're led to believe by the authorities that are responsible for you that if you do the following things, your sentence will be reduced. And when you do those things to their satisfaction, and then someone pulls the rug out from under you, you don't like that. Now, if there's no prospect for earlier release, don't offer it. Why do you offer programs and protocols and things that will further reduce your time away from your family if you don't mean it?
Okay, but you also are telling me you're getting credit for taking Civil War courses.
I explained to you that was one of the courses that was offered.
Okay.
There were many other courses.
But you weren't digging a trench. You weren't doing anything.
Oh, I was working for 13 cents an hour, 6 hours a day. And did I care that it was 13 cents? No, that's just, hey, you're a prisoner. You're in prison, and you're doing a job that needs to be done. And I sure didn't expect any significant remuneration for that. I mean, you're in prison. A prison week is a long week. You're in prison. It's that's simple. You do not have freedom.
Family visit?
My family would visit either every week or every other week, depending upon the weather.
I would imagine you have a lot of time in there to think, too. What was your thought process? What did you think about the last 6, 7, 8 years while you were in there in terms of what you had done?
Well, the things.
You understand my question?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think the day that the receivership came here, April 13th, 14th of 2016, is when the bomb went off. I had some concerns with my former business associate, a year or two earlier, because of his conduct and his way of doing things at Burke Mountain. And so, but after the receivership came and I continued to work here at JPEAK, I tried to look back and think, where did this go sideways? Why did this happen? What did I miss? What should I have seen? And I've gone over that 100 times in my mind. And I had a vision for JPEAK. There was a period of time where the fundraising for these projects was going so well that there was a choice to be made. Do we just finish the projects here and be happy that we finished these projects? Or do we do something beyond that? My personal feeling was that there were tens of millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars being invested in the EB-5 program in the United States, a huge market worldwide. And we were at the top of the pinnacle in terms of attractive project. And I thought, I believe fervently in the Vermont brand of travel, education, agriculture, and manufacturing. When you and I met at the Trade Expo, we talked about the team economy. I remember that conversation. And I believe it. I believe it to this day. And I thought to myself, if I can raise money, a lot of it, how can I diversify where the money goes and impact my community, Newport, greater Newport, the kingdom? And rather than stop and see the funds go to New York or Chicago or Las Vegas, and that's where a lot of money went. Hudson Yards. You familiar with Hudson Yards in New York?
Yep.
It's an EB-5 project. So I I devoted my fundraising efforts, which were substantial, to try to raise money to do some things in Newport. A&C Bio was a core project, but I knew that if A&C Bio was going to be successful in recruiting people and keeping people, that Newport needed a shot in the arm too. You're familiar with Burlington, a city with how many hotels? 25, 30? Newport has a beautiful lake, a nice airport. It's very close to the Canadian border. It has a small motel. So I felt that by investing in projects that would enhance the bed base, bring people into the community, take advantage of the 4 seasons of recreation, and be an anchor for A&C Bio, that between the bioscience facility and the Main Street Renaissance block development and the project along the lake, the Conference Center Hotel, that those 3 things would really, really change Newport for the better forever. And it's what Newport needed then, and it's what it still needs. And then a little further south, you've got Burke Mountain, where the Burke Mountain Hotel was well underway when the receivership took place, but receivership took place in April of 16, and the hotel opened in September of 16. So it was almost finished.
Let's go back here and talk about, you, as you mentioned, your former business partner, Ariel Quiros. How did you get involved with him?
Well, he was a vacationer here for a number of years, and would rent a chalet here for a week or two. And I got to know him just as another vacationing family. And at one point, when we were building one of the townhouse villages that are here, he approached me wanting to buy a unit, have a unit built. So I met him as a homeowner, someone who was interested in buying a piece of real estate here, and he did. And he bought I think it was a 4-bedroom townhouse, and was just like any one of the other 250 homeowners that we had. Around the time that he was taking ownership of his unit, I got every homeowner that bought here. We sold a unit, built a unit, maintained the unit. So we got to know the owners pretty well. And I came to realize or learn that he was involved in international trade, principally in Korea. His wife's Korean. He had spent a couple decades in the U.S. military in Korea. And at that time, I was just starting the recruitment efforts for EB5. And I suggested to him that, if you could introduce potential investors to our project, that there would be a referral fee available to you, which is the way the industry worked. Every EB5 program in the country would, if you were working in Korea, Japan, China, Vietnam, referral fees were the way things got done. And that was always disclosed. So it wasn't a surprise to the investor. But so I indicated to him, I said, if you've got a group of friends or business associates in Korea whose families or children would like to go to college in the States and maybe work here after they're done, the EB-5 visa might be a great thing for them to consider. And he indicated that he had a couple of close business associates in Korea, and that they would set up a seminar in Seoul and invite me to come over and present the first parts of our projects. Now, the first phase of JPEAK's construction didn't start until 2008. August of 2008, we broke ground on the first hotel. And it was in 2006 in September of 2006, that I went to Korea for about a week to meet his business associates. And they put together a couple of seminars at a local hotel where they invited people who they thought might be interested in the EB-5 visa category. And I got there on a Thursday. And the next day, Friday, I was invited to go to the BioHeart Korea groundbreaking. It was going on at that same time. And so I went to the groundbreaking, and many government officials from Korea were there. State Department, U.S. State Department officials were there, because the BioHeart Korea project was a joint project between a U.S. company called BioHeart and BioHeart Korea. And Ariel Quiros, his good friend at the time, Alex Choi, was the head of BioHeart Korea. So that afternoon, the first afternoon I was there, they had the groundbreaking, which was a very impressive event. 400 or 500 people, government officials from all over the region and the federal government. So it seemed to me like, this was a going concern, and there was a lot of government support, a lot of energy. The next day, which was the Friday, they took me to a bioscience trade show in Seoul, which was enormous. I mean, thousands of square footage of Korean, Japanese companies that were displaying their programs and hardware, and I was stunned by the degree of sophistication that I saw. Now, I'm a ski guy. I'm not a bioscience guy, but I could tell that the entire Korean bioscience industry was there. And BioHeart Korea had a very major booth, display, a presence there, and it was very impressive. And so the next day, which was the Saturday and Sunday, the focus was on the JPEAK master plan presentations at the hotels, and my focus was strictly on that.
Including setting up an affiliate of this biotech world.
That trip introduced me to the Korean biotech world. And, so when I left after the 2 days of seminars about JPEAK, all the bioscience exposure I had was just informative. There was no linkage with that. It was just, wow. I was impressed with the scope of the industry and the things that I saw. And the things that I saw BioHeart Korea developing. And I met some of their scientists and their lead people. And the products that they were working on, things like portable dialysis machines and heart pumps and
replacement organs.
A lot of things. And so I came back to home, and that year, 2006, sadly, my partner, Jacques Hébert, died. He had cancer and was being treated for it. And
Who is the owner of JP?
he was the owner of JP.
And you were the general manager?
I was the general manager. Yeah, he was CEO of the company. I was president of JP and general manager here. And when he died, the company, made up of his children and some other French-Canadian fellas, they decided that, we've got 5 ski areas up in Quebec. Jacques was the biggest cheerleader for JP of the group. He's now gone. They said, look, we love you, we love Jay, but we want to focus on our Quebec areas, and we'll ask you to see if you can find somebody that would be interested in buying Jay and continuing the master plan vision that had been put together and rolled out and was underway. I started to just put feelers out, people who might be interested and at the time have the capacity to buy Jay. And I let Quiros know that, the area might be available for sale, and did he have any business associates either in the States or elsewhere that would be interested. And he came up with a company in Korea, Taehan Electric, that had a resort division. And they had expressed, because of his promotion of the idea, they expressed some real interest in Jay. They were aware of the EB5 program and its potential. And they theoretically put together an offer. And I say theoretically because it was subject to due diligence and so forth. They put an offer in. It was acceptable to the parent company, Mont Saint-Sever, but they backed out of it. I think largely because they were going to try to manage it from Vancouver because they had a hotel there. That wasn't going to be a good fit. So when that tentative offer was taken off the table, Quiros said that he would meet with the Saint-Sever principals and see if he could work out something else, some other arrangement. So he and Bill Kelly, another person involved in this, they went to visit with Louis Dufour and Louis Hébert, the controlling shareholders of Saint-Sever at the time. And to my surprise, came back from that meeting and indicated that they had put together a plan to buy Jay. And I was surprised. I would even say shocked that they were able to do that, but enthused that Jay's inertia to implement the master plan would go forward. I got the impression from the Saint-Sever guys that they were excited about the plan, but they were probably going to go about it at a much slower pace. I knew the EB5 capital was huge and racing towards us, and that if we were going to capitalize on the EB5 benefits, we needed to implement the plan when the capital was there. We couldn't say, "Oh, we'll build a hotel and we'll run it for a couple of years, and if it meets our likes, we'll build another one." Well, if that happened, the market would have gone elsewhere. So fortunately, we were able to raise. I was able to raise because I was the fundraiser, a couple $100 million.
Yes, you were. We'll be back right after this. At Red Hen Baking Company, they believe pure, uncomplicated ingredients in the hands of skilled artisans are the building blocks for great food. They're dedicated to creating the best food from the best ingredients. You'll find an ever-changing lineup of delicious pastries, sandwiches, and soups at their beautiful cafe off Route 2 in Middlesex, just off I-89. Their breads are also available in many other locations. Led by owners Randy George and Eliza Kane, Red Hen Baking Company has been on the leading edge of the local food movement since 1999. Back to my discussion with Bill Stenger. Let's talk about your decision to go into business with Ariel Quiros. As you mentioned earlier, I had you on my radio show a number of times. You're not an unintelligent person. And one of the great mysteries to me in this whole story is how you wound up going into business with Ariel Quiros. And there was this week, there's been this story that came out in the New Yorker where your son is quoted talking about Ariel Quiros and that he distrusted him from the get-go. You have a former state official saying, I left our first meeting feeling like I needed to take a shower. One of your lawyers says when you is presented with somebody with status, Bill Stenger is like a kid meeting Mickey Mantle. And then you've got the editor of the Barton Chronicle describing as the guy Central Casting would send over if you're looking for someone to play a dodgy character. No one would have believed him except that Bill Stenger vouched for him. How did you wind up going into business with somebody that your son and even your lawyer?
I met Ariel Quiros in 2002. Built him a townhouse, went to Korea with him. He bought J-Peak in June of 2008. And then in 2012, bought Burke Mountain. His demeanor and approach to his dealings here changed radically when he bought Burke Mountain. And some of those comments that you're referencing, I think, are referencing his approach to things from that time on. I earlier said how when I was in prison, thought back, where did things start to go sideways? And when he bought Burke Mountain and never told me about it, just sprung it on me that he had done it, I was shocked. But he owned, or he claimed he owned, with his Korean partners, 80% of the company. And I had 20%, which is not insignificant, but it's certainly not a controlling share. And I became concerned with what I saw him doing in terms of managerial influence at Burke. And that was the time that was the year that I started to get concerned. And I thought to myself, what do I do? I'm not comfortable with the way this guy conducts himself. The only thing I can say is he's in Florida and I'm up here, and I don't have to deal with him. The reason that I went into business with him in 2008, if you remember 2008, there was an enormous financial crisis. And Jay had a tremendous EB-5 opportunity, but it also needed to establish a strong banking relationship with some financial institution because the Quebec guys are gone. And all of Jay Peak's real banking prior to the sale was done with the Royal Bank and the Bank of Montreal. I told Ariel Quiros before the sale, I said, we have to have a really robust banking relationship going forward. And if we don't, you shouldn't go forward. He assured me that he had a great banking relationship with Raymond James, even saying that his son was an executive with Raymond James and would make sure that any financial arrangements that we needed, that we'd get good treatment. At the time, 2008, I was very relieved to hear that. But I didn't do enough due diligence, nor did my partners in Quebec do enough due diligence about that. We made the assumption that he was well respected at Raymond James. It turns out he did have a relationship with them, but not the banking department of Raymond James, but the investment side. And so, the comments you're making about what, my son might have felt, others that have met him, there were times when I needed to reel him in, and I was not happy with the way he conducted himself. But I said to myself, I've got multiple projects underway. I've got projects in Newport, Burke, hotels underway. What I've got to do is I've got to finish these projects. I've got to raise the money, create the jobs, get these people their green cards, and then once that's done, I'll be at an age where I'll exit. Now, I was also extremely worried after I had seen what he had done at Burke. I mean, changed the name of the resort to his own name. How arrogant and egocentric can you be? And it disrupted the community, the employees. It scared the hell out of our staff here, because we're thinking, if he's going to pull that kind of stuff there, is Jay next? And is Bill Stenger, with only 20% of the ownership, able to stop that kind of mismanagement? I was really, really worried. But I was focused on raise the money, build the projects, create the jobs, have the financial impact that you're supposed to, and then things will work out. I didn't know that he had leveraged money with the help of his son-in-law and used the funds, which were all in Florida. And I did not pay enough attention to his relationship with Raymond James and what he was doing with support of his son-in-law. And that's my biggest regret.
The other thing I just can't understand is why weren't you asking him for simple balance sheets, classic financial information? If I'm a business partner with somebody who I'm uncomfortable with, I'd be saying, every month, give me the sheet, give me the numbers, prove to me that you're honest.
We had a CFO who was a competent CFO who interacted every month with him and with the bank. I reviewed every invoice that was sent down there. I saw every check that was issued, and I signed every construction check for every project. The CFO was a competent person. I relied on him because he spent 2 weeks here and 2 weeks in Florida. 2 weeks here, 2 weeks in Florida. And I often would ask him, is everything okay? Taxes being paid, reports being done. On the EB-5 side of things, we had an obligation with every investor to prove that the money that they had invested was indeed spent on the project. And we did that from here. And that was successfully done with every investor we had. And what he was doing with Raymond James was moving money around, and he was diverting we were so far ahead of fundraising. We can only build so fast, but we had raised more money than the project needed. We were ahead of ourselves, and he was leveraging that, not leveraging. He was taking that money because he thought that he was owed that money because he was the developer, and the developer did have the rights to some of the funds as profit, but not before the project was built, for God's sakes. And I never knew what he had done with the money until the receivership came on in April of 16. But it wasn't as though we got monthly reports, but they were manipulated. My CPA or my CFO, I asked him more than once, is everything okay? Is everything that we're doing legal? Because there was some press reports about phase one payback, and I was very consistent in making sure, because I'm not an accountant, and I'm not. I wish I were now, but I had a guy that I believed was competent and was knowledgeable. But what he told me after the receivership was that the relationship with Raymond James, he was kept at bay.
Okay, but and you're not an accountant, but you're a smart guy. I mean, there were red flags going up all over the place. You had the CFO at JP Cure who quits. You have the controller who comes in after him who quits. You got Douglas Hume, who is the go-between, the broker trying to get EB5 money, who says this doesn't look kosher to him either. I mean, that's a lot of smoke to miss.
Well, those three things are uniquely different. The two fellows who were working here, one was CFO. He was here for, I think, 9 months. That was before any project had been built. John Carpenter, the controller, he was here a little longer than that. He left for family reasons. Douglas Hume had made an enormous amount of money here, and was being solicited by Mount Snow to go to work there because Jay was done and Mount Snow was low-hanging fruit. And
okay, but when he said that he was uncomfortable with some of the finances, you didn't hear that.
I knew what he was referencing, and he had an opinion about how tax filings were being done and when they were being done, and he wasn't comfortable that he and the accountant that I was just referencing, they were butting heads consistently. Now, he had made $18 million here. And
on the administrative fees, each time you sold a $500,000 share, he got about 35, and he made a lot of money. Do I begrudge him that? No, I made the deal with him because he knew how to at least communicate with and find potential investors. Then he would turn them over to me. I would show them around here and introduce them to Vermont.
And that was really the most important part, was showing people, what are they getting into? What are they building? What are they contributing? And as I said, he left here the last time he came here for a family vacation, and went down to Mount Snow. And then about a month later, 2 months later, he left our relationship and went to work there.
That wraps up part one of my discussion with developer Bill Stenger. You can find out more in part two. This is 802 News.